The Galactic Labor Tribunal of Sector 9 had seen many desperate cases. Refugees from collapsed star systems. Soldiers abandoned by their governments. Merchants ruined by trade wars between species that had forgotten the original argument centuries ago. But no one had ever walked into the tribunal's waiting hall the way Kayla Vaughan did. She did not fit through the door. The first attempt cracked the frame. The second attempt bent it. By the third, the automated door system simply gave up and slid into the wall entirely, as though deciding this was not a fight worth having. Kayla Vaughan ducked her horned head beneath the ceiling, scraping off 2 light fixtures in the process, and folded her massive silver-scaled wings tight against her spine. Her tail, thick as a tree trunk and lined with dark violet spines, curled around her feet like a great serpent trying to behave itself. She was a dragon mother. 12 feet tall when crouched. 30 when standing. Her scales caught the light and threw it back like a shattered mirror. Her eyes, 3 on each side of her elongated skull, were the deep amber of old honey, and right now they were red-rimmed and raw. She had been crying. Recently. And for a long time before that. The clerk at the front desk, a small Vethary with 4 arms and a permanent look of mild administrative exhaustion, stared up at her. Name? Kayla Vaughan. Her voice was low and resonant, the kind of voice that vibrated in your chest. I am here to file a wage theft complaint against the Duran Mining Consortium. The clerk blinked all 6 of his eyes in sequence. Right. One moment. That was how Darian Voss first heard about her. He was 3 chairs down in the waiting area, wearing a battered gray jacket with the left sleeve singed off, nursing a cup of cold coffee, and filling out his own complaint form. He was human. Average height for his species, which, in galactic terms, meant hilariously short. Sandy hair in need of a cut. A jaw that had not met a razor in several days. Eyes the color of storm clouds on a planet he hadn't been back to in years. He had been a cargo pilot for the Duran Mining Consortium for 11 years. Past tense. He heard every word of Kayla Vaughan's complaint. The waiting room was not large, and her voice carried whether she intended it to or not. 7 months, she said to the clerk, who was rapidly typing on 6 keyboards simultaneously. 7 months of back wages they are refusing to pay. I worked their deep core extraction shafts on Mira 4. I was the only worker who could survive the heat and pressure. They told me I was irreplaceable. They told me I was a valued partner. Her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly. A fracture in stone. Then they declared insolvency to avoid paying severance. Restructured under a new name. The money simply disappeared. And your family situation, the clerk asked, not unkindly. 4 hatchlings. Kayla Vaughan's great clawed hands folded in her lap. The youngest 2 haven't eaten in 3 days. Dragons do not go hungry well. They are. She paused. They are very small. And very loud. And they do not understand why their mother came home without food. Darian Voss put down his cold coffee. He picked up his complaint form. Stood up. Walked to the desk. Duran Mining Consortium, he said. Kayla Vaughan turned 3 of her eyes toward him. She could look in multiple directions simultaneously, which was mildly unnerving, but her expression was readable enough. Who are you and why are you interrupting? I was a pilot for them, Darian said. 11 years. They owe me 14 months of back pay, hazard bonuses, and the pension I'm legally entitled to. He placed his form on the desk next to hers. I have documentation. Contracts. Flight logs. 7 depositions from crew members. And I know their accountant personally. He paused. She hates them as much as we do. Kayla Vaughan was quiet for a long moment. All 6 of her amber eyes were on him now, which was a different experience entirely, like standing under a very focused sky. You are very small, she said finally. I get that a lot. Why are you telling me this? Darien Voss shrugged. It was a very human shrug, one shoulder, slight, the universal gesture for because someone should. Because they did the same thing to you that they did to me. And because I have a ship. And because if your hatchlings haven't eaten in 3 days, we can fix that part right now while the lawyers argue about the rest. The lawyers argued for 4 months. Darien Voss moved his ship, a battered long-haul freighter called the Meridian Claws, to the landing platform nearest Kalaravorn's nesting site on the outskirts of Rethkai Station. He converted the cargo hold into a temporary storage space for the food runs he made twice a week. Young dragons, it turned out, ate extraordinary quantities of raw protein and mineral-rich ore, the latter for calcium deposition in their growing scales. Darien sourced both through contacts he'd built over 11 years of flying routes that no one else wanted. The hatchlings, Severith, Dawnmere, Kale, and little Torva, were suspicious of him at first. Torva, the smallest, was suspicious by biting him. Darien said ow in a very calm voice, looked at the tiny teeth marks in his arm, and then offered Torva a chunk of iron-rich mineral brick the size of her head. She took it. He was thereafter considered acceptable. By the 2nd month, Severith was sleeping on the Meridian Claw's roof. By the 3rd month, Dawnmere had figured out how to open the cargo bay door and was regularly stealing his coffee. By the 4th month, Kale had learned to say Darien in a voice that set off every proximity alarm on the station. Kalaravorn watched all of this with the careful, calculating attention of a creature that had survived for 300 years by knowing when something was a threat and when it was something else entirely. She was still deciding what Darien Voss was. The ruling came on a cold morning in the 5th month. The Galactic Labor Tribunal found in their favor, both of them, jointly. The restructured company, still identifiably the Duran Mining Consortium beneath its new name, was ordered to pay full back wages, penalties, and interest. Kalaravorn's settlement was enough to sustain her family for 2 decades. Darien's was enough to actually buy the Meridian Claws outright instead of renting it from the bank that had been very patient about the whole arrangement. He found Kalara on the station's observation deck afterward. She was sitting, which for a dragon meant occupying roughly the same footprint as a small building, watching the stars. 7 months of back wages, she said when he approached. For 7 months I worked and was told my wages were coming. And for 7 months I believed them. People exploit trust, Darien said. It's one of our worst features. Our worst features, she repeated. You are including yourself in people very generally. Humans invented the wage theft loophole, probably. We export our worst ideas very efficiently. Kalara made a sound, low, ruminative. Not quite a laugh. You also apparently export people who know accountants who hate their employers. That too. She looked at him sidelong with 2 of her eyes, a gesture he'd learned was her version of studying someone carefully. You did not have to help me. You had your own case. You did not need mine to win. Darien Voss was quiet for a moment. Then, I heard you say your hatchlings hadn't eaten. What was I supposed to do, pretend I didn't hear it? Most would have. Most aren't me. It was, objectively, an unremarkable thing to say. Kalaravorn had heard bolder declarations from warlords. Had witnessed grand gestures from emperors. She had lived through 3 centuries of species making enormous promises about their own character. But there was something about the complete absence of drama in his voice, the flat, practical certainty of most aren't me, that 300 years had not prepared her for. No, she agreed finally. They are not. The Meridian Claws gained a co-pilot 6 weeks later. The upgrade to the cargo bay, necessary to accommodate a dragon's wingspan during the rare runs Kalaravorn chose to join, was paid for from the tribunal settlement, which she considered a deeply appropriate use of Duran's money. Torva, the smallest hatchling, was enrolled in station schooling. She had already bitten 3 instructors and was thriving. Severith still slept on the ship's roof. Dawnmere had graduated from stealing coffee to stealing the entire coffee machine, which was found in the nesting den and was, somehow, still operational. Kale had learned 4 more words: Darien, food, now, and please, the last one apparently only after significant negotiation. In the annals of galactic history, no monuments were raised to the settlement of Calaravorn versus Duran Mining Consortium, restructured. No songs were written. No statues carved. But somewhere between Sector 9 and the outer freight lanes, a battered freighter with a dragon-sized cargo bay flew routes no one else wanted, and the crew, by any reasonable definition, had what they needed. Humanity FCK, yeah, is not always a war cry. Sometimes it is a man in a waiting room who hears something he cannot unhear, and simply refuses to pretend otherwise, asterisk.